All right, welcome everybody. We're back again with another dear author and hope to be friend. Andrea Wilson Woods is a keynote speaker, a writer. She loves to tell stories, which is something I do as well. She's a patient advocate who founded the nonprofit Blue Fairy, the Adrian Wilson Liver Cancer Association, and for over 10 years, Andrea's worked in the education field as a teacher and a professor in public and private schools as well as universities. And we're talking about her best-selling book and award-winning as well, Better Off Bald, A Life of 147 Days. It's a medical memoir about raising and losing her sister to liver cancer. So touching, so moving, so compelling. I can't wait for you to learn from her, to be inspired by her. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here as well.
As I was mentioning to you, just reading the title of your book, you did such a beautiful job. I know you poured your heart and soul. We're going to talk about where the ignition was for this book. But you did such a beautiful job of painting the picture of the narrative that is the memoir that would get us to pick it up to begin with. But even if that didn't exist, even if I had to find out from the very beginning, I was enthralled with your writing style because
Thank
you took
you.
me back to a place of where you were when you were when it was occurring, and I was like, "Ooh, this is masterful work." Because I've seen your other work and I've seen you speak. I was like, you had to return to a place of like this youthful spirit about something so hard and so tragic. Um, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about this book. It's been a while now since you've written it, but it has been a foundational piece for your talks, your advocacy work. Tell us briefly before we talk about the foundation. Tell us a little bit about, because people are going to be wondering about the memoir of just the title. Let them know a little bit so they can let them off the hook, and then we'll dive into the writing part. Tell us about this incredible memoir.
Yeah, so it's Better Off Bald, A Life in 147 Days. And it's about the 7 years that I raised my younger sister, Adrienne. I got custody of her when she was 8 and I was 22. And we were living in Los Angeles. And when she was 15, a month after her 15th birthday, actually, she was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. And so the memoir is written like a journal because I kept a very detailed medical diary, but she also kept a journal as well. And so it's very plot driven in that sense, whereas the chapters are days. And but you see flashbacks that kind of fill in the gaps of, our childhood, how I ended up getting custody of her. And so it was a very intentional structure on my part. Um, and I also wanted the audience to know up front that she dies. I didn't want it to be a surprise. And the other part about the structure was when I read medical memoirs, I got really frustrated because I felt like people glossed over the details. Even people who survived, right? Even people who had a great outcome from having a cancer diagnosis, they glossed over the hard parts. And I wanted people to feel how we felt going through it. And, the good, the bad, the ugly, the great stuff. And I really appreciate your compliment because it was very intentional the way I structured the book.
Yeah. I did notice that. Anybody who's spent time in a hospital with any medical professionals and had to navigate first
Right.
code switching is, what language is this? So you're speaking to me, and then you're expecting me to know everything you just said, and you walk out, and then there's all these amazing discrepancies, and one person says this and someone says that. And I thought you did such a beautiful job of capturing that without sacrificing the storytelling, which is really difficult to do because all that stuff can be really kind of boring, but I thought it was a beautiful way that you captured it and kept it moving forward. And I do appreciate that. I knew when I was sitting down to read, I was like, I know I have to give myself space for this book because every time I sit down, I know I have to take a breath in between. I have to imagine, because I'm really wanting to imagine this situation and let the narrator, let this unfold. And one of the things I noticed, and you can tell me more about this, is I really did feel like your voice, I was like, this could be this voice is the voice of a 22-year-old. It just felt so real. And you talked about your having the journals and things like that. But even as you use it in your work, because you're telling it, you're continually using this information to help other people.
Right.
How did you get to the place of letting some things go and letting your voice return to that angsty 22-year-old who is really trying to navigate one of the most challenging, difficult things anyone might possibly encounter.
Well, I was 22 when I got custody. I was 28, almost 29 when
Okay.
she was diagnosed. You're still angsty though, I think at that age.
Fair enough.
Um, well, people say for a lot of people, writing is cathartic. For me, writing this memoir, the first draft of it, it took over 2 years. And that doesn't include the years I spent doing research, but it was incredibly painful. I purposely wrote in the room where my sister died because I felt her there with me. And to sort of go back in time, I again, thankfully, I had a medical diary, but I was also a writer, and so I had lots of stuff written about before she was ever diagnosed with cancer, and she was a writer as well. And but I almost went to a meditative place where I could go back in time. And I've been told by a lot of people I have I think it's called eidetic memory. It's not
Mm,
photographic, but eidetic, like I can go right back to a place in time and tell you exactly what happened, who said what they were wearing. But I can't pick and choose. It's there. And
mm,
it was painful. I mean, every day of writing that first draft was like getting cut and pulling off the scab again every single day and bleeding a little more again. And that's why I didn't write for more than 4 hours a day, because after 4 hours, I was beat up emotionally. And the other
yeah,
thing I did that I highly recommend if you're doing something this emotional was I started seeing a therapist to support the process.
yeah. That's really wise. I think I will gently recommend that to some of my authors who are doing this work because it tends to be people who've survived really challenging things, traumatic pasts. It makes for some of the greatest teaching and lessons, but it is really challenging. And sometimes it's unfolding as a book coach with me. And I'm like, whoa, I'm not this your person. I think you need to really have someone help you because I can let this come to surface with you in this present moment, but I'm not here to navigate what that means because that's not my role. But I think
Right.
that's really great advice. So some people say, I just knew I had to write this. I just knew that this had to be written. And some people say that I was prompted by others. You have to write this. How was it for you? And how did that process begin? Did you decide, I'm just going to write this and go look for a way to publish it? Or did you get encouraged by someone? Tell me a little bit about that process for you.
Well, I've always been a writer, and I actually got into the journalism school at USC. And so originally I was going to be a journalist. And then my roommate said to me one day, "Why are you going to be a journalist? You hate the news." And I was like, wow,
Fair
that's a
enough.
really valid point. Like I fought so hard. I got into journalism school and then I walked away from it. But I was always a writer. I actually wrote a play, directed and produced it in Los Angeles, and did a lot of directing and theater. And so there was always that piece there. And I knew I would write this story of me and my sister. This was before she
Mm,
had cancer, right? I knew I would write
mhm.
that story because our bond was so special. And I've never loved anyone like I love her. I mean, not even close. And deeply and unconditionally and without reservation. And anyone who met us, especially as she got older, picked up on it right away. Like that, just this bond that we had. And then she gets diagnosed with cancer, and that changes the entire story. And so I knew I still wanted to write the story, but I knew it was going to be a very different story now. And so it took a year after she died, I started doing initial research. And I said, at some point, I'm going to write a story. I don't know when. And one of the best things I ever did, and again, I recommend it if you're writing memoir, is I interviewed everyone who was in our lives during that time who would let me interview them. There was only one person who said no. But I got to interview people when their memories were fresh. And I got to interview them about situations where I wasn't in the room. And that's why so much of the dialogue is it's real. It's from these interviews I did. But I didn't really, start to write it until 5 years after she died. I did the research, I did interviews, and then what kind of kickstarted was I went to a UCLA, your alma mater, go Trojans! But I went to UCLA Writer Studio. It's a 4-day intensive. It's incredible. So shout out to Samantha Dunn, one of my mentors there on memoir writing, because I was like, I don't know how to write a memoir. I mean, I know how to write, but this is a different animal for me. And I had read a lot of memoir, which I always highly recommend too. You've got to read in the genre you're writing. Have to read, read, read. And that 4-day intensive completely turned everything around. I figured out the structure. I found my voice. I knew exactly how I was going to do it. And then I started writing.
Yeah. Most people don't realize that the writing, crafting the story, it's great that you're storyteller, that it isn't just the writing, isn't just putting, like, let me just tell everything that happens. You have to think of the pacing, holding
Yeah,
back, filling in the gaps, because it just takes one person a moment to close the book and never pick it up again because they have six others waiting. Um, and yet you want to tell the
yeah.
story as truthfully as you can in the cadence that works for the truth of your memoir. How did you keep those moments going? Because I was like, this is I almost can't. This is it's painful to read, but I almost can't stop reading. So it's sort of like you did a beautiful job of keeping me engaged the entire time. How did you reconcile those moments where, like, where do I pause? It's an actual day, so I know you have a data constriction, but how did that work for you as a
Right.
writer?
I that's probably one of the best questions I've ever been asked about writing. I was very thoughtful. My outline for this book, and the book is long for a memoir. It's over 300 pages, but my outline for this book was 80 pages. Because I was trying to figure out, like, here we are in present time, and here's, the plot driven, here's the fighting cancer part, and then what needs to be filled in for the reader for them to understand. Um, I think it also helped that I had some amazing first readers. So I was very selective and thoughtful about who those first readers were. Two were my mentors who are published authors and very successful. Then I asked a few other people who were my target audience, who I thought would be the ones to pick up the book. And I got feedback on that first draft, that very messy, messy first draft, from 6 different people.
Hmm.
And I went through, and this was a very painstaking process, but I went through and took all their feedback, and put it into one document. And anytime 5 or 6 people said something was wrong, I knew something was wrong. Right? It was like, okay, this is. I had one chapter that was an absolute disaster, and then when 3 or 4 people said something was wrong, I looked at it, thought about it, considered it, sometimes made changes, sometimes didn't. And if only 1 or 2 people said something was wrong, I took into consideration who the person was and what they were saying it about. A great example of, like, just one person saying something is one of my mentors, who said, she wrote in the margin, "This makes you sound like an overprotective mama bear." And so she was worried about how I would come across to the reader. And I laughed. I was like, I was an overprotective mama bear. That's exactly who I was. And I don't want to shy away from that. So some of the criticism of the book is actually about me as a person. And I'm okay with that. And that's the other thing about writing memoir. You cannot worry about what people think. You've got to let that go.
Yeah, you because you're laying your whole life on the line, the part that you're telling.
Yeah.
A lot of authors who come to me, they want to tell everything but this, and I say, you can. Good readers will sniff out you're holding back somewhere. They won't know where, and they're not going to trust you. Doesn't mean you have to divulge your every bit of you, because that's not necessary. But they
Right.
will know when you're holding back something large behind the scenes that you're not divulging. And I thought, without giving all the details, you did a beautiful job of, like, look, this was I coming from this. This is where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
I thought very specifically of the omelet dinners that you portray, having just enough for that. And when something was wrong and off, when your mother offered to pay for them, I was like, oh, that's a scene that said so much without giving away too much. And I think so many authors are afraid to do that, and because they're protecting others. How did you deal with that issue? A lot of people ask me, well, I don't want to. I'll finish this when so and so's not here, or I'll do this. I don't want
Oh,
to
I
throw
hate
anybody in the
that.
bus.
I
How do you
hate that,
how did you address
right?
that? Hmm.
I I well, I did change everyone's names except for mine, my sister's, and my boyfriend at the time, who was the only father figure she ever had. I almost changed his name, but her nickname for him was really special to him, and so I didn't. I chose not to. And and actually, to his credit, he read the book, and this was, years later. He read the book and he said every single word you wrote was true. That's exactly how it happened.
Hmm.
And he's like, that's exactly what happened. And he doesn't come across in the best light every single moment. Neither do I. Um, but you're going to hurt people's feelings. You are. There was one line in my book, one line about running away from the white trash side of my mother's family. And because of that one line in the book, which I did debate taking out, but it was how I felt at the time. And again, I wanted to be as honest as possible, no matter how I came across. But that one line in the book caused, let's see, two cousins, my aunt, caused a whole like section of people to stop speaking to me for 2 years. And guess what? They got over it. They got over it. It's like the
Yeah.
book wasn't even about you guys. Um,
Yeah.
so I think you have to be okay and just you have to be okay if people's feelings get hurt. Because if you're writing memoir, you're writing about real people. And you can change the names, but guess what? People will recognize themselves too.
Mhm.
And so I think you
Yeah.
have to be okay with that.
They'll recognize themselves, and if even if you don't, they're gonna think they're somebody else. There's no way to fix that problem.
Yes. Or there were people that did not make it into the book. And then they get offended. You're like, okay, like, you're not going to win. You're not going to win.
Yeah.
And so, because there were people that I didn't include in the book because I feel like they didn't add to the story.
Yeah. That's the again, it's the most important part is the story. I often tell people, look, books aren't words. I know that seems contradictory because it seems like that's all they are. Books are stories with
Yeah.
messages that the words are just holding on to so that someone else can internalize them and do something with it. They're not going to remember all the words. They're going to remember that story though. So don't get so caught up in the words. Story is the king and queen in this moment, and we have to have them. That's like you said before. You you can write a book about statistics and numbers and try to persuade people of things, or you can write a book with an amazing story that people can never forget. And I think that's the beauty of the work that you're doing with your writing is I will never forget your incredible daughter and sister because of the way you shared her with me. She's a human. She lives in my life now. I was like, oh, I get to carry her around, and I never got to physically meet her, but I meet her through your words. What a special gift that is. But it wouldn't be if you just
Mhm.
put words. You had to give me the story. You had to give me the truth, and that's what a great memoir does. So thank you for that. Number one, and
Well,
thank you for the
thank you,
advice.
because I didn't want people to forget her. I wanted her to live on.
Yeah, she certainly does. I mean, Blue Fairy is one of the legacies, but I want to tell you how much this impacted me in a way that I was like, gosh, this is what writing a book is for, changing the world. That's my opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
even if it's the world for the one, and it actually only ever could be for the one, right? The one who's reading it,
Right.
the one who's holding
Right.
it, the surgeon, the dull nurse who's almost shouldn't be there, whoever it is, the advocate who just didn't think they had to speak up. Any person that this is for, whoever it is, you're changing their life. And I think that that's the beauty of an angel, right? That's the angel of you who's here and your sister who's not. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful legacy. I just want to praise you for that because
Thank you.
I really, really, really appreciate it. Let's talk a little
That's
about, oh,
oh,
go ahead.
I
I
was
didn't
just gonna
mean to
add one
cut
more
you off.
thing. That's some of my favorite feedback is um, someone who volunteers for my organization now. She had just finished reading my book. Her husband was fighting liver cancer. And he had this episode. And because she read my book, because I didn't leave out the details, because I did talk about everything that happened, she knew what was happening with her husband. She knew
Mm,
exactly what was wrong with him without having a medical degree or even nursing degree. And she called the hospice nurse and said, "He's losing oxygen. I need you to come over right now." And so she knew without panicking, and that made me feel so good because she knew what to
Yeah.
do. And she also gave him a beautiful death, which I think is the best gift I could have given my sister was I gave her a beautiful death.
Yeah. Yeah. And you gave it to yourself. I really, that's how I felt. I was like, gosh, this is such, because you're parenting yourself in that moment.
Yeah.
Let's talk about memoir. So I don't want to, it's too early to cry.
Okay.
Um,
It's t
the, the beauty of this is a memoir's job is to give someone a
Right.
perspective of the life that you're living, to give them something to take with them when they leave your work. What advice would you give memoirists, a leader, somebody who's never written a memoir or thinking maybe my story matters? What would you tell them that's important to do? Let's say they didn't keep copious notes. Let's say they didn't have journal or they didn't have access to, it's been decades. They can't access those resources. What would you give them as advice to really make sure they're holding true to the story they're trying to tell?
Well, why do you wanna tell this story, and why do you wanna tell it right now? And and narrow the story. I think that's the single biggest mistake I see, um, some memoirs make is the story's too broad. It's too big. It's a
Mhm.
biography, right? And not a memoir, and those are very
Yeah.
different things. And sometimes I'll hear people say, "I can't believe this person wrote a memoir. They're too young." No, they're not. A memoir is about a moment in time, and that's why my book only covers 7 years. It's a snapshot in time of my life. I'm working, on a prequel before my
Mhm.
sister came into my life because her coming into my life changed my everything, for the better. I was actually in a very bad place when my sister came into my life, which I decided not to cover, in the book because it didn't belong there. It's a different story.
Yeah.
So why the story? Why now? Um, and yeah, if it's gonna be a memoir, you can't worry about hurting people's feelings. You have to be okay with it. Don't ask
Yeah.
permission.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I always try to tell authors, look, it's your life. You've been half
Yes.
the reason you're writing this memoir is because you've been asking for permission to live and you're writing it now. So let it go. And yes, you can be young and yes, you could have a short period of time to write a memoir. I remember I was teaching memoir writing to 12-year-olds and I just wasn't sure what was going to happen
Oh,
because
how
to teach the
cool.
concept, I had them read very difficult memoirs. So teaching 12-year-olds memoir, I realized that what they really needed to understand was they could see their past any way they chose. They didn't have to tell it like they thought it should be said,
Mm.
that they could put on the rose colored glasses to see it how they perceived it, but they had to be honest. And some of the stuff they wrote blew my mind because they just realized they had permission to say what they really wanted to say. And it was
Yeah.
hard. Hard not for me or them, but it was honest. And I think that's the part. And the other thing you said earlier in this was that you didn't always paint yourself in the best light. And too many authors try to paint themselves or other people in really fair lighting and not just be honest. That's also another thing that you do really well. And I think if you're listening, I want you to understand that you can't just show up with the Photoshop version of
Yeah,
yourself on stage.
right, the Instagram worthy.
Yeah, we all have those places where that is necessary, but a memoir is not the place where it shows.
I agree.
Um,
And you can
and,
tell
and
as a reader, right? You can tell, like you said, you can tell when people are holding back. You can tell when they're only presenting the good side of things, or they're being too Pollyanna is what I call it. Um, and yeah, that's what makes me as a reader stop reading, and because I feel like something's off a little bit.
yeah, yeah. Even in the beginning, when you when you bump the car of the PTA mom or whatever,
Oh,
I
yeah.
was like, you didn't paint yourself in a pretty light. You were just,
I was awful.
you were,
I
but
always wondered if that woman
honest.
ever reads my book because she'll know who she is, right? I didn't know her. Yeah, I mean, our kids went to the same high school,
Yeah,
but I didn't know her. But no, I was pretty horrible to her. So
rightfully so in the moment, right? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. It that wasn't critical if you didn't put the truth into the story, but putting it in made us feel like, oh yeah, that would
yeah,
have been then the edge for me.
that was the first
You
time
know,
I said cancer out loud. It was rough. It was
yeah.
really rough. So I'll tell you a funny story. Just as my book was coming out, and I had tried to track him down, my sister's favorite doctor, the one she had at the end at UCLA.
Mhm.
And I tried to track him down. He wasn't at UCLA any longer. And this was before Google was actually really good at being Google. And I could not find this guy. And I'm at a conference, an oncology conference. It's actually the largest medical conference in the US, and with my organization. And I have a meeting with this biotech and they mention his name. And I was like, whoa, 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 back up. Can you tell me? Can you say that again? Now, I changed his name in the book, but anyone in the space knows who he is. Like they're going to recognize him right away. And I was like, he's here. Like he's here. And this is a conference with 40,000 people. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, he's here." I'm like, "He has to come by our booth, like, please." And they knew my book was coming out because I had these bookmarks ready and stuff, and I said, "He's in this book." And they were like, "What?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "He was the doctor that my sister and I both liked. He was the one that was the expert in her cancer, and, um, and he was the one that treated her the way she wanted to be treated." It's very important. And he showed up the next day and we reconnected and we both almost burst into tears, like right there in the conference
Wow.
center, because I knew he would remember my sister because he didn't see teenage patients. We had to push really
Yeah.
hard to get an appointment with him. And it was amazing. And then I said, "Oh, and by the way, you're in the book." And I said, "But you come off looking great, so don't worry." you know, as opposed to some other doctors, you are amazing. So it was really funny. I don't know if you ever read the book. We've stayed in touch, but he's in it. So
That's incredible. What a special moment
oh, it
that must
was,
have been for you.
it was.
Yeah, it's incredible. Um, I want to ask a question about other writings because when we
Yeah,
write such a seminal piece, in my opinion, something that defines a organization, defines a movement in some regards, that has been a pillar of work in addition to the things you've done in the past. What besides you're writing this potential prequel, what other writings are musing inside of you that maybe they're fluttering, maybe they're barking, I don't know how it works for you, but like that they're coming at you now as you know, life has this way of giving us things in the seasons that we're at.
I have so many books in my head, and so I mean, so many different kinds of books, and I think this is one of the reasons I don't sleep well, like dialogue in my sleep. I mean, just so much that I'm getting to a point where I'm going to give myself more time to do it, make more time to do it. Um, what surprised me is that I started working on a novel last year,
Mm,
and and I never would have thought I would have written a novel, a thriller, actually. And it is grounded in truth. It's based on real characters, but I was like, to have a lot of fun with this, it needs to be a novel.
yeah,
I'm not going to be James Fry and take a novel and make and say it's a memoir. No, it's based on true characters, but I'm going to make this a novel and have a lot of fun with it. And the first like 10, 12,000 words poured out of me. I couldn't believe it. And so I thought, I don't know if I can do this. And I really didn't trust myself. So I actually went to a Writer's Digest workshop and got feedback from the agent. And they only give you feedback on the first like 2,500, 3,000 words. But I was like, good enough, because again, it's the very beginning. Is the person going to keep reading the book or
yeah.
not? And I got the best feedback from the agent, made the changes she suggested, which were perfect. And she loved loved the feedback that I incorporated, and so I've let some other people now that I trust in publishing read the first few chapters, and mind you, this is a messy first draft, it's not edited or anything, and people love it. So I know I'm onto something with that novel, but if you had told me even a year ago that I would be thinking about a novel, I would have said, "No way." So I actually, to follow my own advice, I've started reading more novels, and which was not something I'd done in the last like 10 years. I always read nonfiction. And so I've started
Yeah.
reading more novels to kind of get the feel of what works, what doesn't, what I like, what I don't like.
Yeah. Well, I don't ever like to assume, but as a reading, I was like, oh, there's a writer, like a story writer, like fiction in you, because that's how I felt. Like, I know this is true. I know this is real. That's why it's so moving. But it's like, Andrea's a writer. Like,
I'm gonna take that as a compliment. Thank you.
yes, no, really, truly, because I do this a lot. I've been 8 years interviewing authors, and it's just there's this subtlety in the things you notice, and I think that recall you have. I think a lot of that sort of being able to bring yourself into that moment, the blessings of trauma, the gifts of trauma, the gift of life.
Right.
Sometimes those gifts are used in many ways. I think yours is in recalling specific nuances that make something seem real, like it's happening
Yeah.
in such a specific way that it makes you there. So like that was the gift I was like, oh, this isn't just storytelling. This isn't just the cadence of the way this goes, when to interrupt, when to flashback, the details. This is the nuance of someone understands the subtleties of how people behave because you're recalling it in such a way that you remember the details, not what happened, but the moments and how they happen. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't happen always in memoir. So I just felt I was going to ask you. I was like, are you writing screenplays? What are you doing? Because you have a gift of like that specific
Thank
way of
you. Well,
integrating something that make it clear.
well, oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts. I'm gonna try to get them all out really quickly. Show don't tell, right? Every time, show don't tell.
Yeah,
Never tell your reader how to feel, and um, let them. You can imply, but let them infer, right? And I always liken that to pitching and catching. And but don't tell your readers how to feel. It's kind of like music in a movie telling you how to feel. It's really irritating, you know.
yeah,
If the story's strong enough, you don't need to tell me how to feel. Um, and the other thing is, I actually started writing several years ago the sequel to Better Off Bald. I have the whole book outlined. It's not 80 pages, the outline, but I use Scrivener now, but it's totally
mm,
outlined. I got 30% of the way with the first draft and realized, oh my gosh, I'm not finding the tone here. Like I
mm,
wasn't finding it. I was like, the tone is off. Like, I'm not someone right now that would read the book the way it's written. Like, there's something off with the tone, and so that's why I put the sequel down. I'm still gonna do it, but I put it down because I was like, I'm not ready. Something in me is not ready to write this yet, or, you know, I'm struggling with it,
yeah,
and so that's why I put that down. So I think that also being really self-aware when you're writing,
yeah. Well, what's the reason you want to write this?
because I don't think people know or understand what other things happen in your life after the loss of a loved one, especially a child, like someone who died long before their time, and the ramifications. It's, you know, it's like throwing, you know, a pebble in a stream or whatever, or a lake, let's say, and you see those ripples. And I never anticipated, for example, that I would lose all of my friends. All of the
Mm,
friends that I had in Better Off Bald, I no longer have. And there was only one instance where I ended the friendship, but other people just walked away, just disappeared. And it broke my heart all over again because we had this
mm,
close knit group of friends. And my relationship with John ended. Now, that did not surprise me. But because of that, because of the grief I was in, I made some really bad life choices, really bad,
mm,
and so I think it's this ripple effect of grief that you don't really anticipate or understand. Um, and it affects everything. It really affects everything. Um, I was married to a man I never should have married. I never would have married if my sister had been alive. She wouldn't have liked him. I knew that. Um, and it was going through that as well. And so that's why I want to write that book, because the grief doesn't end at any one specific time, first of all, but also no one tells you that all of these other things could potentially happen. And I remember I read this amazing short story in a book called The Friend Who Got Away. And it's a
Mm,
collection of short stories from female writers about how they lost one of their closest friends. And one of the short stories was about a woman whose best friend just disappeared after the death of when she lost her child. Her child died when she was only 5, and this best friend that had always been there, and they'd had children around the same time and everything, just poof, gone. And I reached out to that author and I thanked her. I thanked her so much for that story and how much it meant to me. I believe her daughter's name was Grace. And I just felt so deeply for her, but that was one of the stories that one of the very few stories I've read about what happens when you're grieving and these other losses that pile on top of the the most important one.
yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I
You're
think that
welcome.
really helped clarify and also maybe let people know why memoirs are just slices of life.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Not a biography in any way.
Yeah.
And
Prequel's only about a year of my life. It's just 1
yeah,
year.
and gosh, the way you told this, just the snapshots of your own. I think you could probably tell a day in the life, and it could be a book. In some ways, I'm like, this could be a day.
Well, to quote my
I
husband,
really
who's
think.
who's my this is my second husband, he's my husband for life, he's amazing, he's like, "It's never boring with you." That's what he says, "It's never boring."
That's awesome. My husband and I write. We interviewed our father, my husband's father, during the
Oh.
pandemic because we couldn't see each other. We interviewed him over Zoom
Oh,
and then
wow.
did some in person. But he got sick and he died of cancer. But he had 3 beautiful years in between the first diagnosis and remission and life. So we got to tell a story about growing up in a holler sort of area in southern West Virginia in a coal mining town where he grew up, very walkable to a red light district, and what it was like to be 14
Oh, you
and
mentioned
in
this
that
in a
era.
previous podcast, and I was like, "I need to look this up." I was like, "A red
Yeah,
light district in West Virginia?" Like, I was intrigued. I was so intrigued.
yeah.
I mean, I've been to Amsterdam. I've been to that red light district. Super cool, fascinating. But like, I was like, "Wait, what? In West Virginia?" Like, oh yeah, no, it sounds really intriguing, and it's wonderful that you were able to do that.
Yeah, and capturing those stories, they were just little he would just tell me, so, "Hey, I'm gonna tell you one," and he would tell me a
Yeah.
3-minute story, and the reason I said you could tell a day with your mom, because he would tell me a story that would take 3 minutes, and I was like, "This isn't gonna be a book," like, so I was like, "We're gonna have to I wanna do this fictionalized because then I could just take all of the personas you've told me, and I'm watching you."
Yeah.
But most of the stories I've written they take place in a weekend. I was like, how did this whole book, this is only a weekend? How is this possible? But it's all the craziness it could possibly transpire with that sort of 14-year-olds in an area where, you could get into a lot. So, um, the last installment of the book, though, I knew I wasn't being honest because I was afraid of hurting people.
Mm,
Um, because it wasn't a memoir. It was sort of honoring, and I think I wouldn't be honoring if the third wasn't just telling more of the truth.
right.
So
Right.
I'm really excited about that. I get to lean in a little harder,
That's
which is
good.
great, and I'm learning from great writers like you who come on the show, which is actually, if I'm honest, the reason I started this show was a selfish reason. I didn't even have, a brand yet that would need this, but I was like, how am I going to interview really amazing authors and find out what they know? Well, like, what would do it? It's like a podcast. They're gonna want to tell me, and I ask them all these wonderful questions, and that's what it's been like interviewing some of my favorite authors. So, you being one of them, I'm really grateful that you're here.
Oh, well, thank you again for having me.
Yeah, I look forward to reading this. But when you have them, come back. Let's talk about those books, whether it's the prequel or the sequel or this fascinating fiction book, which I'm already interested in because I know your writing style.
Well, I also wanted to
But
share, last year? No, 2 years ago, we published my sister's book. I'd rather be dead than
oh,
deaf, a young woman's journey with liver cancer. And so it's my sister's book. It's from in her own words. It's a combination of memoir and an art journal because she was such a prolific writer herself, but she was an incredible artist. And she spent 2 years in an art academy. Her art was hung in 3 LA galleries, and this is by the time she was 15. And so she left behind all this body of work, and so it's this art journal. You get to see snippets of her art, but it starts a year before she was diagnosed and goes right up until her last journal entry, which was just a few, like, less than a month before she died was her last journal entry. And and all the proceeds of that benefit Blue Fairy, the nonprofit in her memory that focuses on liver cancer. So it's a really amazing book. Not one I would recommend as an ebook because you do want to see the full color art. But it's a really incredible book, and I just served as the editor, but even putting that together was very emotional for me.
I can't. Yeah, I can imagine. I look forward to reading that. That's really great that exists. We'll put that in the show notes as well. So if you're listening, please get that book. Um, yeah, that's incredible. I didn't know that, and I didn't really that didn't really cross my mind. I'm blown away. I love young people's writings. I've learned so much from it. And the reason I'm saying that is I being a book doula, I look for signals of books that could stories that could be book or things that people say. I don't highlight in my Kindle because I don't go back and check those notes. If I'm honest, I would never. That's a really nice feature, but I don't use it. I, I did when I was reading your book and those words came out of her mouth. The quote I highlighted that. That's why I'm so struck. I was trying to think. I
Oh,
was like, that's what I highlighted. I was like, oh, this would be an incredible book. I wonder, like,
yeah.
it was so good because it had such the resonance of your book. So that's wonderful. I'm so excited to read that one as well. That makes me thrilled.
And may I
Well,
say,
this has been so
I
lovely.
know we're wrapping up. I just want to say, just because we're talking about
Yeah,
memoir, I got pushback on that title of her book.
really.
Yeah, from I don't know why, from very different people. But like one person said, this is so inappropriate. I can't promote this. I'm very involved with the ASL community, and I work with deaf people. And I said, I understand. One, I'm not asking you to promote it to your community. I never asked this person to do that. And two, I said, these are her words. This is exactly what she said to the doctor. It's how she felt. It was a deal breaker for her. And that's okay. Like, that's okay. And I mean, I wasn't happy about it at the time. Don't get me wrong. I was not happy, but I understood it. And I was proud of her, for standing up for herself. Even in the moment, I was mad at her, but I was proud of her as well. But those were her exact words. It's how she truly, truly felt, and I didn't want to take that away from her. Again, if I had diluted that, then I wasn't being honest with the reader.
Yeah. That's what I just struck me. I highlighted it and I wrote it down. It's like this. That's why I was like, oh my gosh, that's so incredible. Such a synchronicity. So thank you. Thank you for standing firm and thank you for, I hope you're listening to what Andrew's saying that you have to be the advocate for your message. You can't try to please everybody. You're doing it for your why is more important than what other people's why is, and you have to stand firm.
I agree.
Um, if you have a story inside of you, obviously stories can incite movements, change the world. They can heal people. They can help people. And I hope that you will write a book too if you're listening. Andrea, thank you so much. Where should we go if we want to follow you, learn more about you, and support the work that you do?
To support Blue Fairy, go to bluefairy.org, BLUEFAERY.org. We're a national nonprofit focused on preventing, treating, and curing liver cancer, ultimately. And for me, just Google me, Andrea Wilson Woods. I'll pop up. You'll find me everywhere. So
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, it's been a pleasure. Welcome back anytime, and I wish you the best on all your writing endeavors.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.